Hello, BookTube. I'm sorry that I've been absent for a little while, but I have been busy. There are a bunch of videos that I've been meaning to get to that, for example, the 5-star reads of 2016 and the worst books of 2016 that I personally read, and talk about my own reading goals and how I succeeded and how I failed in doing those. But for right now, I'm just here with a book review, and it's for Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. So for those of you who don't know, Trevor Noah is a comedian who was born and raised in South Africa, and he is half black and half white, and he was born during apartheid when black people and white people weren't supposed to mix, let alone interracially date or interracially marry. So he was literally born a crime, and both his parents had to, when they were out in public, refuse had to act like he wasn't their child, because it would have because because his existence was evidence of their crime. And so he if it became known that he was half black and half white, he would literally have been seized and gone to an orphanage while his parents had gone to jail or prison. So that's quite a burden for a young child to bear. So he's talking about, and Trevor Noah is now the host of The Daily Show. The Daily Show is a show that runs on Comedy Central, previously hosted by Jon Stewart. And a lot of us were huge fans of Jon Stewart, and we suddenly heard, hey, who's Trevor Noah, who's supposed to take over Jon Stewart? Obviously, he's going to have some big shoes to fill. And so a lot of skepticism was met when we heard that Trevor Noah was going to be taking over this Daily Show. And I think this book by him really helped me to understand his life a lot more and understand his perspective a lot more and where his sense of humor comes from. And he's one of those people, although he's quite young, he definitely deserves to write a memoir, because sometimes celebrities, they'll write a memoir and nothing will really have happened to them, and it's kind of like, and then A happened, and then B happened, and this is how I became where I'm at. But he has a truly unique experience of being mixed race during apartheid, and what he noticed too is he obviously wasn't the only mixed race child to be born during apartheid, but his family never left. Other families did. So the mixed children were born in South Africa and they moved to Belgium, or they moved to India, or they moved somewhere else. But his family never left, so he grew up with the ramifications of that. So he definitely has had a lot of unique experiences, and he has... his memoir does what a memoir should. It has an awareness that it needs, so he knows distinctly what's going on in his country at the time. He knows what's going on while his own personal life story is plodding along. He knows what experiences are unique to him and what are universal, which makes it a really worthwhile read, I believe. Andy, not now. Sorry, that's my dog. And he's a very self-aware writer. He's a very poignant writer. He's very, it's something too that I think most people in the Western world, apartheid, it's like the most racist regime in almost, in the modern world. And so for him, he has a very unique perspective on it. And he has a very, and it's very worthwhile to read if you're interested in South African history, if you're interested in race relations, if you're interested in just even like personal memoirs of interesting people. It's not just a typical celebrity memoir. And he writes with incredible eloquence too. Now he lives in the United States of America, and America is actually quite unique because in most other places of the world, their race relations, or in most other colonial states, race is more of a scale. So, like for example, if you people who are half white and half black are of a different class than people who are fully black or fully white. But in America, it's it's if you're black at all, or especially before modern times, but it was either white or non-white. So, like the way my sister puts it, like in the 1800s, you could be, fully white. You can be, 90% white and 1/16 Native American, and you were black. Like, there's not a lot of subtleties in American culture. So, and the American distinction of race, and that's gotten better. It's gotten better, especially as like new immigrants have come in and things like that. But it's very, but the, but for the sake of this memoir, it really captures, Trevor's struggle to find a community that he belonged to, because he was too white to fit in with the black kids, and he was too black to fit in with the white kids. And then in South Africa, there's a separate group of people called the colored people, who they're a mix of both black and white and the indigenous population, which has since died out. And he looks like he belongs with them, but he doesn't actually fit in with them. And so he grew up all on his own. He grew up a lot of times playing by himself and being by himself, and knowing that he had to, knowing that he didn't have a community behind him, and there was no larger community that he was able to connect to, and as well too, there's some incredibly powerful stuff too about later on his mother marries his stepfather, and his stepfather turns out to be very abusive, and there's a lot of very powerful stuff about nature of abuse, and about like, it's the first chapter of this book literally starts out with when he was a child and his mother threw him out of a bus, and it ends with his mother being shot in the head by her husband, and it doesn't stop for a moment in between. This is a story that needs to be told, and a memoir that needs to be read. And I wanted to offer a few samples from the writing and again too, it's another thing that I tend to notice with celebrity memoirs is that the writing itself isn't very good. It's oftentimes quite elementary, but his writing is very, very self-aware and very, and has a lot of gravitas to it. Let me see. So he reflects a lot on his relationship with his mother, and his mother was a single mother, and he credits her with him being the man that he is today. She had an iron will, and so this is what he says about growing up in the South African ghetto. This is on page 73 of my edition. We tell people to follow their dreams, but you can only dream of what you can imagine, and depending on where you come from, your imagination can be quite limited. Growing up in Soweto, our dream was to put another room on our house, maybe have a driveway, maybe, some way, a cast iron gate at the end of the driveway, because that is all we know. The highest rung of what's possible is far beyond the world you can see. My mother showed me what was possible. The thing that always amazed me about her life was that no one showed her. No one chose her. She did it on her own. She found her way through sheer force of will. And so he credits his mother with teaching him that the world is bigger than he could see, and with giving him the endurance to launch himself out of the place where he was born. Okay, and then this is one part that he said, this is on page 100, where he talks about Fufi, who was a dog of his, and this is one instance where Fufi had been escaping and had been going off to play with another little boy, and he felt quite betrayed by it. And he said, I believed that Fufi was my dog, but of course that wasn't true. Fufi was a dog. I was a boy. We got along well. She happened to live in my house. That experience shaped what I felt about relationships for the rest of my life. You do not own the thing that you love. I was lucky to learn that lesson at such a young age. I have so many friends who still, as adults, wrestle with feelings of betrayal. They'll come to me angry and crying and talking about how they've been cheated on and lied to, and I feel for them. I understand what they're going through. I sit with them and buy them a drink and say, "Friend, let me tell you the story of Fufi." And, Fufi was my first heartbreak. No one has ever betrayed me more than Fufi. It was a valuable lesson to me. The hard thing was understanding that Fufi wasn't cheating on me with another boy. She was merely living her life to the fullest. Until I knew that she was going out on her own during the day, her relationship hadn't affected me at all. Fufi had no malicious intent. And I'm going to read this sentence again. I believed that Fufi was my dog, but of course that wasn't true. Fufi was a dog. I was a boy. We got along well. She happened to live in my house. That experience shaped what I felt about relationships for the rest of my life. You do not own the thing that you love. And this is, and the next passage that I'm going to read is, talks about the Holocaust, and about the Holocaust, the way that we remember the Holocaust in comparison to other genocides, and I think he hits the nail on the head here. There's a book that I've mentioned on this channel before, and it's called Regarding the Pain of Others by Susan Sontag, and it's the way that we remember the Holocaust versus we remember African slavery, or we remember many other types of genocides, really shows a lot about our culture. And so, the name Hitler does not offend a black South African because Hitler is not the worst thing a black South African can imagine. Every country thinks their history is the most important, and that's especially true in the West. But if black South Africans could go back in time and kill one person, Cecil Rhodes would come up before Hitler. If people in the Congo could go back in time and kill one person, Belgium's King Leopold would come way before Hitler. If Native Americans could go back in time and kill one person, it would probably be Christopher Columbus or Andrew Jackson. I often met people in the West who insist that the Holocaust was the worst atrocity in human history, without question. Yes, it was horrific. But I often wonder, with African atrocities like in the Congo, how horrific were they? The thing Africans don't have that Jewish people do have is documentation. The Nazis kept meticulous records, took pictures, made films. And that's really what it comes down to. Holocaust victims count because Hitler counted them. 6 million people killed. We can all look through that number and be rightly horrified. But when you read through the history of atrocities against Africans, there are no numbers, only guesses. It is harder to be horrified by a guess. When Portugal and Belgium were plundering the Angola and the Congo, they weren't counting the black people they slaughtered. How many black people died harvesting rubber in the Congo, and the gold and diamond mines of Transvaal? And I think, again, that's a really excellent point. And I think there is definitely an element of self-interest in there as well. We remember the atrocities that we ourselves have been privy to. Like, there have been so many genocides but throughout history, but why do we remember the Holocaust? Is it because we defeated the Germans and so we want to feel like the good guys? We don't remember the genocides of the Native Americans that we personally inflicted, so we think of ourselves as heroes and them as bad guys, and so it allows this sort of like unilateral sense of like right and wrong. Anyways, there's just one last paragraph I would like to read, and it's on page 221. And it Trevor Noah, for a little while, he lived in the hood, and he was involved in some, like, minor crime scenes, minor crime level, stuff, and this is what he has to say about, how apartheid and how crime is rationalized. Whatever rationalization was handy. In society, we do horrible things to one another because we don't see the person it affects. We don't see their face. We don't see them as people. Which was the whole reason the hood was built in the first place, to keep the victims of apartheid out of sight and out of mind. Because if white people ever saw black people as human, they would see that slavery is unconscionable. We live in a world where we don't see the ramifications of what we do to others, because we don't live with them. It would be a whole lot harder for an investment banker to rip off people with subprime mortgages if he actually had to live with the people he was ripping off. It would be another if he If we could see another's pain and empathize with one another, it would never be worth it to us to commit the crimes in the first place. And I think that's where I'm going to leave off. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, and I realize that this has been a bit of a long review, but hopefully you enjoyed it. And again, when I have time, I'll be back to do my wrap-ups for 2016. Thank you all for watching. Doei!